Welcome. Thank you guys for coming and for being here. I'm Charles Law, the founder and CEO of Law Security and Investigations, Inc. Our purpose is to provide a safe, distraction-free environment to our clients, their family, friends, and staff through high discretion, white glove security services. We are a full spectrum security solutions provider, which means we cover all aspects of security, but we specialize in manpower. So meaning we provide people. So whether that be uniformed armed guards, executive protection teams, residential security teams, corporate office security, what have you, we pretty much do all of that kind of thing. I started in the business in 2000. I played football all through school, and then I studied kinesiology in college. I worked doing exercise rehab for a chiropractor for a number of years, treating his patients at his direction. I also had a personal training business, that type of thing. I worked for a friend who needed someone to handle a residential detail on the weekends. Client kept firing people, and he's like, I just need somebody to hold down the weekend. So I did that because I needed another job. I did well at it. I enjoyed the industry. Got all the private sector training I could get my hands on, made myself as valuable as possible, and I never really went without work. The gaps of no work were maybe a week at a time, and it was not much at all. So I was very fortunate in that respect, but it was because I invested in myself so aggressively that I was able to get positions. Got in law enforcement with it was a local out-of-state agency. I was listed as a part-time police officer. I did that for about 10 years. I was a medic, part of their ERT team, until the program ended. That experience lent quite a bit to the security industry and to how to interface with law enforcement and that type of thing. Started the company in 2010, didn't do a whole bunch with it, ran a few contracts through it until 2015 when we decided to push the company pretty hard, myself and a few managers that we had going. Every year since 2015, we've almost doubled in size. So we've had a pretty good run, survived through pandemics and whatnot, helped us in some ways, hurt us in other ways, but we've been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate as an executive protection specialist, and the company has been very fortunate in the products that we deliver and the clients that we're able to get. So looking forward to continuing to double in size every year if we can.
Would you say that quality played any role in your success?
Obviously a huge role. So high standard of service, maintaining those standards, improving upon those standards and adding to them as much as possible has helped us continue to grow. Separating ourselves from competition with those standards as much as we can, because there are some very good companies out there, but the best people, the best companies are few and far in between as the quality gets better and better. So we try to get the top of that scale as much as possible. One of the things that I did right is bringing in the right people. So I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And I know who really knows those things that I don't know. So that's as far as legal, accounting, my detail leaders, my management structure. I try to surround myself with people who are all better than I am. But it's worked well, and we've had some success with the company for that reason. Now we are between a $4 and a $6 million company, depending on the year. The last few years, we've done that type of volume. We have about 7 to 10 stable accounts that are consistent 24/7. We have a lot of pickup work that happens so often. We do events as well. So it's on award show season. We get busy with that kind of thing. So we do quite a bit. We have uniformed armed guards at schools, churches, synagogues, and corporate offices. The bread and butter of what we do is residential security teams and corporate office security. That's usually plainclothes armed agents. And then we also do executive protection, and we have guys travel all over the world for that.
That was actually my question. So you said for like your bread and butter, the most of what the company does, is it mostly in LA or it's just all over wherever the...
Mostly in LA. The bulk of what we do is in LA. We are licensed in Texas and in Florida. We've been so busy here, especially since the pandemic and kind of the upheaval in every industry, including the security industry. We've been extremely busy here, so we haven't pushed those other states, but we have feelers out and we're working on that kind of thing.
How many staff do you have?
So we have actively around 50 staff right now, but we have a roster of hundreds. So a lot of those guys are part-timers, but are pretty active. Most of those guys are full-time or full-time, part-time. So we have 50 going at any time. And like I said, around 10 accounts. It's a good amount of traffic right now. We're managing it well, and we've streamlined everything and become efficient enough to have a lull, which is unusual in this market because everybody wants security. What that's doing is allowing us to expand, for example, Texas, Florida, and also in LA. LA is our prime market and where we want to grow. So the interest is to continue and double in size every year as much as is possible.
How many team members do you have?
So team members we have are around 6. So that counts our executive strata, sales, and management team.
Right.
So we have about 6 running there. And then, like I said, as far as agents go, we have about 50 running at any given time. And that expands and contracts depending on the workload. It can expand wildly. We've had accounts where we had to add on 20 guys. Sometimes for a night, we've had to add 50 guys for an event or something like that. But on an extended long-term detail, we've had to add about 20 guys or 114 shifts from one day to the next. 114 shifts per week from one day to the next. We successfully did that, which was amazing. We weren't even sure we could do it, but it stretched us enough to know what our capabilities are. We have some larger accounts which have multiple sites. So multiple residences, it includes corporate offices, and it includes executive protection teams. So we have roughly 5 EP agents or so at any given time. We've got 10 to 15 residential guys running, and then a few guys at corporate offices. So it varies wildly. It's a large account. We also provide investigations for that, workups on people of interest, stalkers, what have you, as those things come up. So we do kind of a broad range of services for that.
What type of investigations might you find yourself doing?
We get a overzealous fan or a stalker or a letter in the mail or what have you. So we get as much identifying information as we can. Our team on the ground does that. They supply it back to the office, and then the office initiates an investigation. Find out who that person is, where they reside, their background. We do a threat assessment on it. How much of a threat is this guy actually? And we'll bring in experts for that depending on how serious it is.
So you said account, like an account would include all the residences and the corporate office and blah, blah. So what, like, is the account just one contract with whoever it is, whatever company or individual it is, and everything that entails is one account?
Yes, good question, but let me explain it. So I'll pick a big account so I can give you all the parts. The one account I was talking about earlier has multiple residences, corporate offices, what have you. The account is the client that we're servicing. Now that account has multiple principals who are people that we are protecting. So the client is the entity that you do the services for. The principals are the people that you're actually protecting.
Okay.
Then of course we'll protect property as far as residences and corporate offices as well.
But you don't call them the property principals. You call the people the principals.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly. Property is a site.
Okay.
So it's a site to be protected.
Okay.
Okay, good. So for example, Coca-Cola, that's not our client, but say it is. Coca-Cola is our client. It's the Coca-Cola account, right? But we might work with their point of contact, who is the VP of security or the regional VP of security in the Southwest or something like that. So we may protect Coca-Cola's sites, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now that is the client. If they have a CEO or something that they want us to protect, that will be a principal.
Right.
Okay.
Makes sense.
What about family members of that CEO?
It could be if they want the wife covered or children or what have you, depending on the threat level, how much they need security, how much they can tolerate security. Sometimes clients hate the idea of security and they don't want it around at all, even though they need it. Sometimes clients don't necessarily need it, but they want to have it around.
So whatever's in the
everything
contract.
varies. Exactly. Yeah.
And then you asked about who the person is that you're talking to as part of the account?
Yeah. That's a point of contact. Okay. So that's the person that we deal with in managing the account. For example, it could be an estate manager, it could be a business manager, it could be an assistant, or it can be all those things that you have to work with.
So would the point of contact ever be a principal? Like if you're protecting them, they're the big head honcho guy, but they're also the ones who deal with you and pay you and draw up the contract with you.
It can be, and we have had accounts like that, but they're in the minority. Yeah. If people need this type of service, they usually have a staff.
That
you're going to deal with. Yeah, exactly.
That they delegate that.
Exactly.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. So that's the brief history of LSI and what it's doing now. Now we're going to talk about assessments. When you initially get a client, there are a number of assessments you need to do to determine need. So most importantly is a threat and vulnerability assessment. Does this person actually need security? What are the threats that you're going to face? What are the vulnerabilities with this client or their sites? And how do you mitigate those? Right? This is an ethical approach to providing security services as opposed to just throwing guys on a detail and trying to make as much money as you can. Right? You want to provide a valuable service if you want it to be long-term. Threat and vulnerability assessment is that. There's also a protective intelligence assessment, which is you will have a principal who you'll do a full workup on background, social media, their place of work, their routes of travel, anything pertaining to this person and their movements. You will do an assessment on that to identify threats. The internet now is so dominant, especially with social media and all these avenues of communication. It's actually with open source information. Open source just means it's not classified or government protected or what have you, right? You can actually find this out online. You can pretty much find about anybody online, anything that you want to know.
So is the protective intelligence assessment predominantly online at this point? Or do you actually have someone who watches them drive, like they go to Starbucks at 9 a.m. and then they do this and then they...
The protective intelligence assessment is just an analysis initially of what are their movements and what do they do. We're not moving with them or anything yet.
Okay, so just in their general life, what communication lines are they on?
Yeah. What state are they in? What city? What neighborhood?
Got it. So it's not like a minute-to-minute type of situation.
No, this is an overall assessment of what their activities are and what threats they may face.
Okay.
Okay, good. Beyond that, if you're protecting a residence, there's a residential risk assessment. For all these assessments, we bring in subject matter experts that we work closely with, and they do all of these for us. We work them up on each client before we start service, so we can inform them effectively on what their needs are. We want to advise them well, so this is what we use for that. A lot of companies don't do that. There are a number of them that do, and those are the most professional, busiest, and they have the longer term contracts just because it's doing it to the best of your ability.
Yeah, it makes sense. If one guy says, I just want this and this, but they have this gaping vulnerability somewhere.
Exactly.
Then.
Yeah, I want 10 armed guys at the front gate, but there's no fence in the back. Yeah, that might not work.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Then we do those things. We'll have our conversations with the clients based on what our findings are. So we'll give a findings and recommendations. Once we land on what the package should be, we call it a security package. What that may mean, you have a residential team only. It may mean you have that and a corporate office team. It may mean you have those two things plus an executive protection team. You may protect one principal or 5. It just depends on the account.
Does the point of contact or client give you to start off with, I want to protect XYZ, and then you do the site assessments, then you kind of combine the two, or you do that just purely based on what you as LSI say they should have?
Good question. It's a give and take with the clients.
Okay, good.
So a lot of times clients come and they say, I want this.
Right.
Sometimes it's right based on all these findings. A lot of times it has to be tweaked, or sometimes it's just wrong. So we don't take every client. Some clients may not need us. I don't want to upsell them. I can give them a product or another company that can solve their problem, save them money, build that relationship. Now they're in my network and we can, help each other out.
So you have some integrity.
A little bit. Yeah. It's key to our success. So that's a big deal. Yeah. A high profile client, for example, who is very prominent on social media and that type of thing, is traveling abroad. And on their social media, they would list exactly where they were going to be, and when they were there. They're on social media, plenty of pictures, wearing a lot of jewelry. So now they're time and place predictable, which is a no-no. We don't want that to happen with our clients if we're protecting a principal specifically. So This individual was time and place predictable, 4 armed guys. It was a country in Europe, went into the apartment and robbed her, tied her up, bound, gagged, the whole thing, stole over $1 million of jewelry. Obviously not the outcome that you want if you're providing security. So there's also challenges that we deal with clients. Sometimes they don't want as much security as they need. So if we have a client that is posting like that on social media and we know it's a threat and a vulnerability, we will advise against that, of course. If they don't listen, sometimes that might not be a good contract to have because you're gonna get hit at some point. If you have millions of dollars of jewelry and people know where you are all the time, you're done. There are bad people, right? Right. Okay, good. So do we want to be a part of that? No. In one of these examples, the principal asked their security to go handle something else and leave them. They figured they were safe in their, wherever they were staying, hotel, what have you. And that's where they got hit. So there are times where you have to really articulate yourself, explain the need for security, why you do and don't do certain things. And there are times where you have to walk away from an account because it's unsafe. Another example, I was a young agent. I just came into a detail lead spot. So I was running a residence. The clients had a budget that they wanted to cut way down. They did cut it way down. I complained for about 6 months. Emails, phone calls, what have you. This is not a good idea.
Now, what kind of client was this?
It was a high profile client, right? Well-known out in the media, social media, all those types of things. So the residence was known. So it was open source information, another no-no. That happened before I even got there. Anyway, so I made recommendations to beef up the security detail based on the need. I was not listened to. It was so bad and so light at one point that somebody hopped the front gate, walked all the way into the house.
But didn't you warn them?
Yeah, so prior to that, I said, listen, if you do this, someone will end up in your master bedroom. I have no idea why I said that. It's what hit me and I knew something bad was gonna happen, okay? So I tell them that, sure enough, hops the front gate. We had one guy on duty who couldn't have covered this entire property. There's no way. You can't watch cameras and lock doors at the same time. The planets were aligned. The person of interest found the open door and ended up in the master bedroom. So the nanny actually had to make contact and call him down to the kitchen. Then our agent responded, talked him down, sheriffs arrived and effected the arrest for trespassing. We got an emergency restraining order. It was a whole thing, but that should have never happened. So only thing that saved me is I had complained so badly that one of the points of contact told me I was gonna lose my job if I complained one more time. So I went pretty hard. Now, in hindsight, as hopefully an older, wiser agent, that might have been something I should have walked away from. Absolutely. We were very lucky. It was a mentally disturbed female, tiny lady, not violent at all. So we lucked out. If it was somebody violent or intending harm or something like that, it was all bad. There were no principals home. One of the kids actually was in a different room. So it could have been really bad. So sometimes that's why I say I had mentors tell me all money's not good money. And all he means is just, you have to put yourself in a position to succeed. If someone does not allow you to do that, you got to walk.
Right.
Okay.
Would you be willing to walk us through a typical residential site assessment?
This is a broad overview. So it starts off with going to the site. For example, it's a residence. You go to the site. You want to see what are the points of ingress and egress. Ingress is where do people come in. Egress is where do people go out. For example, the front gate, they do both things there. Is there a front gate? Is it a gated community? So that's even an outer gate. Is there a gated community? Is there a gate at the residence? How far is it from the gate to the structures? How many structures are on the property? How many doors in and out? Windows, what are the points of access to the residence? So you'll go walk through, look at all of these things. Does it have an exterior fence or wall or anything? Does it have intrusion detection systems? They're either infrared beams or cameras with analytics that will alert somebody if somebody comes onto the property when they're not supposed to. So there's a number of things to work through. That's very broad, but you want to identify all those things. It's part of your assessments to identify what you need to cover, right? So if it's completely locked down except for one front gate, good, you probably want somebody at the front gate. and then maybe somebody to rove around. If there are multiple points of entry, depending on the size of the property, you might need more than one person. So the recommendations will be based on what you find in your site assessment. The other value of a site assessment is you got to go and get your hands on it. You can do a lot remotely with Google Earth from above and that whole thing. You can prep everything, but you actually want to walk through and see what are the locks on the doors, what are the locks on the windows. So there's quite a bit that actually goes into it, but that gives you your hands-on, real-time view of what you need to solve.
Do you have like basic laws or rules that you always have to have in place in site assessment, or do you have like a checklist of things that are?
There are checklists.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's always like there's like a standard basically,
Yes.
and it always has to be at that standard.
Yeah, so there's a baseline standard. Obviously, every property is different, right? It has different systems or what have you, gates, doors, what have you. So it's going to vary, but you will have your basic checklist of these are the things I need to cover in my assessment.
Is it as detailed as like, can I see what's inside the house from 150 feet away? Or is it like reflective windows? Like, is it that detailed?
Yeah, you can look at quite a bit of those things. Good, what rooms have power, what rooms don't have power. You know, you can get incredibly in depth.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now some of these depend on how much does the client want. Some of them want it full boat, and then other ones go, good, I'm not so worried about whatever. I want you to cover this other thing. So we'll still check everything and tell them what we think that they need.
Right.
And then we'll meet in the middle depending on what is their tolerance for security and what do we need to be providing. And we can do a lot from the office. Like I said, you got Google Earths and all that kind of thing, but it would be probably good to go to one as well.
Okay.
Yeah. That is your overall view of the assessments that we do. Initially coming into a contract, investigations are a little different, but that's a different kind of assessment, right? Now you're in the contract, you've been servicing it, you have a threat, meaning a person, and you'll do a background on that guy, which will be a threat assessment on that individual. So there are different types. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the various types of assessments that we do, where we do them, and why. So let me tell you how agents are procured and onboarded. How we find agents, the far and away best option for this is word of mouth. So that's you draw from your network, and your network includes all your guys and their networks, right? Oftentimes we'll ask the team, we need a few guys, who do you know that should be working for LSI? Or who do you know who should work on this contract? Who do you know that can handle an executive protection position? That's far and away the best one. Beyond that, we've had to recruit heavily at times. So we'll also use services like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, EP forums. Those are executive protection forums where guys will go in and talk to each other. Facebook groups, job fairs, referrals, obviously. Sometimes guys will just come in through the website looking for work, or someone will come to us unprompted and say, hey, my brother has the background experience, you should use him. That type of thing.
Are those people like super common? Like there's a lot of people with like military background or law enforcement experience, or like there's a lot?
I've had different views on that, right?
I mean, I realize it's a very general question, like
No,
a lot. What does a lot mean?
It's a good question. It's varied through time. It's a good question for now, because since the pandemic, there was a huge upheaval in every industry, including security. So we used to have tons of guys, and it was very hard to get a job because you had to compete and you had to have the best background and resume. I've won jobs because I had good training and experience, and I've lost jobs because it wasn't as good as somebody else, or they wanted a military background and I didn't have that. So it varies. It has been very difficult in the last year or so. So a lot of people moved out of state. Huge corporations were throwing exorbitant packages at agents to build up their teams because they were able to do that. So it dried up the talent pool significantly. We're starting to come on the back end of that to where guys are more available. You really have to know where to look, and you actively look and be effective in your recruitment. Doesn't matter if there's only one guy left or 100 guys left. Like you got to do the work to find them. And sometimes it's more or less depending on what's going on in the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also, there are 19 million vets in the US today. So there's a lot.
Yeah, there's plenty of people that need work. We are very veteran friendly, military friendly, law enforcement friendly. If a guy has performed effectively in government service, they know how to work in a team, they understand a chain of command, they know they typically mission first. There's exceptions to every rule, but those are backgrounds that help. Then we have private sector security specific guys that just work in the private sector, no background in military or law enforcement. In my experience, even though they don't have that type of experience all the time, I started like that, they try harder because they know who they're competing with. So they'll work hard, they'll do more private sector training, they'll invest in themselves, they'll go to courses and train with different instructors in order to become well-rounded. It comes down to the person and the guy's character mainly, but we assess all those things.
And do all of the agents have to have licenses to carry weapons?
Yeah, so 80-90% of what we do is our armed details. So the minimum requirements to be employable are a guard card and an exposed firearms permit from the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services. That is for a uniformed armed position that is exposed. You can see the weapon system. Beyond that, you'll need those things and a concealed weapon license for any type of static detail, we call it. It means they're not moving with clients. They work a residence or a corporate office. Any mobile details, which is executive protection teams, they'll need all of those things and some form of EP training or school. So those are the minimum requirements for those different activities. Guys will come to us sometimes without all of the requirements. If they don't, we help them. We give them resources, what school to go to, what permits do you need, that type of thing, and then we'll reassess once they turn those things in. In California, the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services licenses security personnel in the state of California. If a guy wants to carry plain clothes, for example, you're on an executive protection team, you don't want anybody to know that you're armed. Or at a residence and they don't necessarily want to see that and you want to carry it concealed. You also need a California concealed weapons license. Or an HR 218 compliant ID. What that is it is a law enforcement ID that has been approved for the guy to carry off duty. With that ID, they can carry in all the 50 states. Whereas a private sector guy without that ID can get 3 or 4 state permits that cover about 30 some odd states, but they can't necessarily carry everywhere.
So if they're traveling with their principal or whatever, they have to be somewhere where it's covered.
Exactly. Or be law enforcement with that ID, and then they can carry there. Or we'll have maybe the agent in charge who is with the principal have a counterpart. So his advanced guy will be a local law enforcement or a guy qualified, and we'll use him, and that's who we'll use for the armed contingent. So obviously going to other countries, there's a lot of non-permissive environments, so you'll have to use locals for things like that, or vary your package depending on where you're going to be operating.
Wow. So you have to set all that up. So
Yeah.
if someone in your account is going out of the country, you have to know and liaise and figure it all out.
Yeah. There's actually quite a bit that goes into it.
And who at LSI handles that? What position?
Management.
But specifically, it's the COO would do that?
Yeah. Ideally, it's ideally it's the detail leader. So this is good questions. This is something that we're fine tuning. Whoever's running that account should be doing, meaning whoever is the lead on that movement should be doing that. Management often has to help with that because that guy's so busy on the ground doing his job that he may not have time for that. But that's part of his prep. It's part of management's prep to set him up for success. Right.
Okay.
So there are country threat assessments through the State Department website that we'll look at to get a good idea. Some places in the world are very safe, and some places are very not safe. So we'll do a lot of background on that prior to the detail. And sometimes that time frame, we like a big time frame. Sometimes that's really squeezed. If somebody calls me today, says, "Hey, we're leaving to wherever, Africa tomorrow," that's tough.
Yeah, no, I get it.
There's a lot of work that has to go into that.
Okay.
That wouldn't happen. There's enough logistics that you got to sort that out. But
Is there a text that you recommend that describes this subject?
the book is Advanced by Dave Johnson. That is phenomenal on advanced work. He covers every aspect. It goes very in depth all the way to the light sockets on the wall in a room. I believe he was in the Army, but he worked some very high level details and ran them. So it's a phenomenal book, highly recommended. Terminology, it'll square new guys away on terminology in the industry and give you the broad's eye view of how in depth you can get with it, and then you can scale from some of that.
And tell me the title and the author one more time.
The book is called Advance, and the author is Dave Johnson.
I think you were asking about certification. So what are the minimum certifications for an agent?
Minimum certifications vary depending on the detail. So I'm going to go through a few different details, and I'll let you know what that looks like. So, for example, we work a few schools, and we have uniformed armed guards at the schools. They need at least the guard card and the exposed firearms permit. For us, we typically will have them come to the range with us and do a training day. It tells us a lot. Is he proficient? Is he safe? Is he proficient? Can he follow directions? What's his personality? That kind of thing. Because schools are challenging. There's a lot of friendlies and there's kids around. If something goes badly where you needed an armed guard at a school, you better be proficient. That's a rough day, right? So those are minimums for that type of account. Now, on a residential security team or handling corporate offices or what have you, typically those are plainclothes concealed details. So they'll need the guard card, the exposed permit, and a concealed carry weapons license. For those, we like some type of residential security training. There are a number of outfits that provide it. We would like to see that. It's not always 100% required. Okay. Beyond that, on an executive protection team where somebody's going to travel with clients, we want all those things mentioned prior, but we also want an executive protection or a PSD course, personal security detail. Usually those guys have worked in law enforcement and done some dignitary protection for whatever their responsibility was there, or in the military and done that type of thing. Then they'll come get some, they may also do some private sector training, and they've worked in the private sector also. Doesn't always have to be that case, but we want some significant training for that. They have to interface with clients, their points of contact. They have to think ahead with logistics. You always have to be 10 steps ahead of a client. They have to understand how to do it in advance. Our job when we're with a client is to protect them, yes, but we want to keep it seamless. So everything we do is based on State Department or Secret Service protocols, or companies that have that experience and train that way. So you'll learn how to work in a 5-man detail, but now you only have 1 or 2 guys. Good. You just condense those responsibilities down to those 2 guys. But we want guys to have that type of understanding so the client never feels a bump.
For the agents that have these licenses, the weapons licenses, are they good like forever, or do you have to refresh them or take some kind of exam?
So you have to upkeep them. Typically, concealed carry permits are every 2 years. There's quarterly quals for an exposed firearm permit. And then the guard card is every 1 to 2 years. You have to update that.
And then is that just for the state of California, or is that federal law, or who sets those?
State of California.
Okay.
So the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services dictates.
Sorry, you said.
Yeah.
Do you mind defining guard card more specifically?
A guard card just means the guy has basic security training. It's a 40-hour course. Powers of arrests. I don't even think there's investigations in there, some basics, things like that. So it's just, what are your responsibilities going to be as a guard protecting a site? So it's very basic.
But it's like a California BSIS or something. Like, what's the exact, like, what is this card? Where do you get it?
From the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services. They issue the guard cards.
Cool.
Right.
Cool. And that's based on a test or a course?
Both. It's a 40-hour course. A lot of outfits provide it. And then a test is usually part of that course. Yeah.
Cool.
You also have to qualify with the exposed permit. It's not terribly difficult. We like guys to have more training than that, but you do have to qualify so they know you're somewhat proficient before you get the exposed permit. Another way you can procure people is building your network, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. So develop relationships with groups that provide agent resources. For example, training outfits. Camp Pendleton has job fairs, so there's that type of thing. There are different companies that provide the training that you want to see. Building those relationships and being a resource for them to place their guys is a good way to get people that are qualified.
Wow. How many of those companies are you have ties with?
We need to build it up. So this is part of a program we need to do. But there are 4, 5, 6 that are local, meaning between California and Vegas. say. A couple that are on the East Coast, but they're the top schools that that guy has some proficient training, right? To get a certificate from that course, you have to perform.
No, but I mean, does LSI have relationships with any of those that you just mentioned?
We do. I've gone through a number of them, so I have somewhat of a relationship. There are others that we need to build.
So just a few, like 2 or 3.
Exactly. Good. So how we onboard agents is we use a software. Basically, they need to sign all of their onboarding documents, which is confidentiality agreements and non-disclosures, the employee agreement, and there's a few other agreements that they need to fill based on human resources requirements. So we have them do all that paperwork. We'll also do an interview. So we have managers interviewing. They'll record the interviews via Zoom, and then they'll send it to me or to whoever the detail leader is, or both. That way, that person who's too busy to do the interview can actually look in on it when he has free time and determine who he's getting. So interview copies of all the permits that are required. Then we have to check those and make sure that they are active. We've had some that we've found that are not active. We've even had a guy forge his, I think it was his guard card. No, it was his exposed permit. Literally forged it. I couldn't tell. We just had a manager who understood Photoshop, and the font was just off enough for him to check it. So we checked it, still looked like it was good. And then we checked it against the number and the guy's birth date and found out it was not. That was fascinating. Never seen that before. But that's a key step. You have to check the permits, right? Nothing at face value. We got to check it all. So get all those things, have them do all their paperwork, maybe come do a training day with us so we can get eyes on them and see how they operate in a group and conduct themselves. And then we'll go to placement. Okay, so there's various ways to check different people depending on their background. For example, a guy coming from the military has a document called a DD-214. It's just the government document that lists their separation of service. Was it honorable? Was it dishonorable? And there are a few different contingencies that give you an idea of how he did with his service. Tells you what they did in there, what date to what date. Any like major disciplinary issues or things like that will be in there.
Like a profile from the military.
Basically a profile of their military service.
And do you have to be in this kind of field or this kind of agency to get it, or anyone could just sort of look it up online and get it?
Typically the individual that you're recruiting will have it.
Oh,
Anybody in the military will have it. Yeah, they'll send you a copy.
Okay.
Exactly. Law enforcement, a lot of that is word of mouth. There's not a DD-214 for law enforcement, but did they retire in good standing? That's your key. You know, if the guy resigned in lieu of termination or something like that, then you might have to look closer into that type of thing. The other thing we need to do is talk to whoever they worked for prior, who was their supervisor, what companies, and we'll talk to a few people and just verify the type of employee he was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's how agents are procured and onboarded. Now we'll go over how clients are signed up for services. Typically, it starts with a request for proposal, and that could be a very formal thing. Usually it is not terribly formal. A large corporation might need a security team for something, and they'll request a proposal, which is a pretty formal, written out document of what your capabilities are and what you suggest. Typically, it's a company or individual who decides they need security and will fall in with 3, 4, 5 other companies who are bidding on this thing. So that'll entail typically meetings with me and the decision makers, written proposals, until we can, 1, get selected, and 2, come to an agreement with the client on what their needs are. In the initial proposal, we'll propose the various assessments that we need to make a good decision on what their security package is. That'll be dialogue back and forth with me and the decision maker and or the clients, sometimes in meetings. I've had up to 12 meetings with a client before getting awarded a contract before, meeting with various echelons of their organization. And then other ones, it just comes and falls right in your lap. You're the only one that they're considering. So it varies wildly. Typically it's someone seeking out security services. What We've been in COPE as a company for a long time, so we're moving off of that, and now we're starting to really push and go get work. Most smaller companies, things just get brought to them through a relationship or something like that, which is all fine, but I want to be more proactive and go out and get work.
Sure.
Any questions?
If you could walk us through an actual client that you've gotten and how they heard about you and how they contacted you and all that kind of stuff.
Good. Here's an example on how we got a client. This one happened to be a school. So they had an in-house security program, which was not run legally per the state laws, because you have to do it through certain licensing and that type of thing. So they couldn't just necessarily have guys in-house. So they were looking for a provider to provide this for them. We were in the running with, I think, 4 other companies. So they had 5 altogether that they were looking at. We came in late. We were more expensive than everybody else. How I got introduced to it is I had worked with a guy literally 5 years prior to that and hadn't talked to him much since then. And he said, hey, we're looking for a provider. Are you interested? Yep, throw me in the pot. I had a meeting, turned in a proposal, and then we had meetings with different echelons of that organization. They had some other interests and other groups that they had used their facilities. So we had to meet with a number of different people. Yeah, that took weeks. So that's probably 8 weeks or so, 8 to 12 weeks, and multiple meetings before we got awarded it. And that's one example of how we do that.
Once they said, you're in, what's the exact series of steps that followed?
Once they selected us, then I did all the assessments, right? So we did our threat and vulnerability assessments, we did our site assessments, all that entails good. What's your schedule? When are kids coming and leaving? When are staff there? What hours of the day? All that type of thing. So we got a good view of what their operation looked like. Then they had a good idea of what they needed as far as positions, but I made my recommendations, which we went back and forth and lined those things up. Then we had guard selection. Those were uniformed armed guards. So I had to bring in a number of guys and get them interviewed. So one, we had to interview and approve them, and then bring them in for the school administration to interview and approve them. We retained 1 or 2 guys who were already working there, and then we brought in probably 4 to 6 more. They weren't all working at the same time, but they would work in shifts. Once those guys were selected through everybody and passed, and we had our team together, then we issued them uniforms, gave them the standard operating procedures, we call it SOPs, trained them on it, did a number of walkthroughs with these guys, and let them get on with it. The benefit on that one is our detail leader, we retained, who had already been working there. So he knew the whole operation, so it went pretty seamless. Still, myself and other managers were there quite a bit in the beginning of the contract startup to get everything running smoothly. Beyond that, then there's some administrative things you need to do, like find out good billing information. Who are you billing? Where do invoices go? How frequently? All that type of thing. That's all part of the contract, but you have to finalize all those things.
Cool.
Yeah.
So describe a single day in the life of one of these guys. What time he shows up, what type of checks he does in the vehicles and people that enter the building. Like, give us a clear picture of what they do now.
So that varies wildly, but on this one, these guys will inspect the vehicles underneath. We have mirrors and whatnot. They check the trunk. They check the individual's license. They put it through a Raptor system, which checks their background really quick, make sure they're not a sex offender or anything like that. It gives you an instant green or red light if there's a problem. So we do that, make sure they're either on the list that we already have. If they're not on there, we'll call inside to our point of contact and make sure that they are approved to come on site, and then let them on. That counts for parents, vendors, staff, the whole 9. Once guys are there for a while, they know pretty much who is who. Anybody they don't know, there are checks and balances before they even let them on the site.
Cool. And like a vehicle that wants to drive on, describe what they would do with that vehicle.
A vehicle coming on will stop at the gate. They'll interview the person, make sure that they're supposed to be there, per what I said earlier, and then they'll do a once around the vehicle to make sure it's clear. Once it's clear and their guys approved to come on, they'll let them through the gate.
It's awesome.
Okay.
And hence, there's been no shootings at this school, right?
No, it had a good program when we got there, and we have augmented that. But yeah, no incidents. there's incidents everywhere. So people have attempted to get on. We've handled that at the gate. So nobody's got on that wasn't supposed to be there. So good track record, trying to keep it that way.
Cool.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Cool. And then when you sign them up for services, how do you bill them?
That's based on the agreement in the contract. So we'll go through meetings on how they want us to bill them, put it into the contract. Typically, everybody right now is billed weekly. So we do payroll weekly. Legally, as a security company, we have to do weekly payrolls. So to keep it simple and the same thing on every day, we also do invoicing on the same day as payroll. Payroll starts, then we know who worked what shift when and for how long, and that'll plug into the invoicing, which will happen weekly. That invoice will go to whoever their billing point of contact is, and then they'll either issue payment, or if they have questions, it'll bounce back. We'll solve those problems and then have them pay.
Cool. Are there any other ways that clients are signed up for services?
No.
Okay.
Pretty much how it is it's usually word of mouth, or sometimes we've had inquiries come in through the website. So people can send an email on the website. That's happened a few times. Or I'll catch wind of something, and if I know somebody in the vicinity, I'll have a conversation, see if I can find that point of contact or decision maker and start the conversation there. Another item I just thought of is we don't do a ton of this, but we subcontract for other larger companies on occasion. So a large event, we've subbed for bigger companies for that type of thing. Residential details, we've done that on occasion. If it's the right contract and it makes sense, and we have personnel depending on the duration and all that kind of thing, we'll do that type of thing. So that's another way we get work.
Cool.
Yeah.
What makes LSI a better choice than other security companies? Like, compare LSI to other security companies.
So there are good companies out there. There are not a ton. LA is saturated with a number of smaller security companies. So a guy's an active law enforcement and somebody asks him to run a detail, he'll just start up a detail. Maybe great at law enforcement, doesn't necessarily mean he knows how to run a security detail or have the resources necessary, depending on the client. Sometimes they do. We have a handful of competitors that are outstanding. So that makes it at the top of anything, there's a lot of competition. So we have to be great at what we do. Part of what we do that separates us and puts us in that echelon of good companies is the preliminary work we do with all the assessments. So just a professional approach. Good, do you really need this? How much do you need? How little do you need? I'm not going to try to make $1 million off one account. I want to make sure you get a good service. So by doing that, simply that alone separates us from most other companies. Further on licensing, we talked about what the agents need or the guards need. As a company, you need a private patrol operator's license, which is issued by the Department of Consumer Affairs Bureau of Security and Investigative Services. That's the company license you need in order to run a security company. There are companies out there that don't even have that licensing and do this type of work. So we have that licensing, we have insurance, the minimum requirement's $1 million, we have a $5 million policy, trying to go above and beyond. That covers pretty much any contract we'll run into. There are some very large contracts that require up to $15 million. At this time, we're not working on any of those, so we haven't had to do that. But our licensing, our insurance, background of myself and our managers and our team, our investigators, is what makes us strong as a company.
Cool.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then what would that mean in terms of an event that occurs that the insurance would cover that makes you more valuable because you have this?
We have a few different insurances. We have a general liability insurance, which is the main one of concern. So for example, right, Joe Blowstar has no security and he slaps the paparazzi for mouthing off, what have you. He's going to get, that's an assault charge, and he's going to get sued civilly for that and probably lose some money. So for example, in that type of client, they'll want security with that guy to deal with those problems. Obviously, you don't want the moneymaker, so to speak, or the star to have to deal with those things, or to have to protect himself even, right? He's worth a lot of money to the studios that are taking care of him, right? So they want security there. Security will deal with that. They know how to use verbal judo, we call it, or de-escalation, in order to get out of potentially combative situations, right? If they do get into it, they know how to handle that as well. But now you have a security company in the way with their licensing and insurance. Everything's legal, there's insurance in the way. When that when the aggressor attempts to sue the client, which they will try to do because that's where the money is, now they have to go through the company's insurance policy. So it's better to have $1 million, $5 million of a room is better than $1 million of a room, right? So it insulates your client legally as far as their safety goes, and also in civil suits and that type of thing.
What a freaking awesome selling point.
So your insurance, like LSI Insurance Company, would have to pay this paparazzi that got slapped.
If he was right,
if he went to sue and he
yeah.
won, and he won like $200,000 in damages for emotional distress or whatever, your insurance company, because it was a guard or a executive protection agent who was there rather than, you know, Katy Perry or something,
right,
your insurance company would just cover it.
It depends on a multitude of factors, but that's what the insurance
That's
is
the
there for.
concept.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
See, that
It
is
insulates the
such a
client.
good selling
Yeah,
point.
because then Katy Perry doesn't have to deal with like her whole legal team and like her money and all this other stuff because
Right.
she's, you know,
Right.
she's the boss.
Exactly. So as far as a selling point, security is expensive. So we talk about security like car insurance. No one wants to pay car insurance, but you pay it because you might get in an accident and you'd rather not have to come out of pocket for that. So security is the same type of viewpoint for those that need it, right? It's insurance. It's something that you hope you never have to use, but you definitely want there if you need it. And it also, as the selling point, insulates you from coming out of pocket on civil suits. We've all heard the stories. Somebody got in a fight and got sued for $10 million.
Right.
So it helps insulate them from that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
What are some questions clients ask you that you then, and tell us the answers you provide in terms of them asking about your services when they're considering using you for their security services?
A lot of times they'll ask, who do you work for? Who have you worked for? Who do you work for? That is always a vague answer. Every client we have is bound by, we're bound by their confidentiality agreement. Our team is bound by our own confidentiality agreement. And in the industry, it's frowned upon if you're name dropping, that kind of thing. It's not needed. You either do the work or you don't do the work. So they'll ask who we work for. I just general answer that. We work for high profile individuals, VIPs, high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals. We also work for corporations, educational institutions, things like that. We've worked for a number. If you want references, we can provide a list of references. So you can be an entertainer, sports figure, politician. There are a lot of people that are very visible in the world, and with that visibility comes the need for security. Some other questions that clients ask are, what are your capabilities? Can you service this type of contract, right? So good, our client tours 10 months out of the year. They're out of town, they do it domestically and internationally. Can your team handle, and can you provide guys for that workload? That's a good question. My answer to everything is pretty much yes. Now, sometimes you have to hash that out in the contract on what that means. For example, a client will say, hey, I want the same guy all the time, I never want him to change. It's just not possible, right? 24/7, all day, every day, it just doesn't work that way. So guys get sick, cars break down, they leave the country. I don't know. They go live somewhere else. They decide to, work at Starbucks. What are you going to do? So we tell clients, good, completely understand that concern. We definitely want to get you consistency with your personnel. How we can do that is give you a small team, 3 to 4 guys, depending on the workload. They'll be the same guys you see every day, and you give us a runway to introduce you to these guys. You select who you like, and then we'll keep that team consistent. So that's another question. Beyond that, it's really, can you service this detail? Here are our needs and wants. Can you solve that? 99.9% of the time, we can solve that. If it's something that we can't, or it's not in our best interest, then I'll say, we are probably not your best option, but I will give you other options. I've got 3 or 4 other options I can put you in contact with to help solve your problem. That way it maintains the relationship and PR with the potential client. And I've had situations like that materialize years later into a new client because I had a good relationship with that. So that's some examples. So as far as some clients that we may have decided not to work with, anything unsafe or illegal, it is a rule across the board. We don't do any of that. If we have an existing client that asks us to do something like that, we very politely and articulately decline. And then it gets pushed up the chain of command to me, and I usually have a conversation with a decision maker about what we will and won't do. Typically that's hashed out before you're in a contract. So we've had clients come to us and we knew flagrant drug use, out all night at potentially unsavory places. And we've had clients come to us that we knew they just wanted security as a show of force, and they wanted them to get into altercations and show their strength or what have you. Not what we do at all. We detect, deter, and prevent incidents before they occur. We do not get into incidents. So if someone's going to put us in a situation, which is we're going to potentially get into an altercation, we don't want any part of that. Now, depending on the detail, things can materialize and you can get into that. But ideally, you do so good on your advanced work that that's not even possible. That's how we formulate our gigs. Anyway, that's a few examples.
Such a great answer, yeah.
So depending on your role in the company, this is to give you a general idea of how clients are signed up for services. Depending on that role, you'll deal with it different ways, or you may not deal with it at all. But just so you understand how we are bringing clients in, we can all work toward that end. All right, so let me give you an idea of the day-to-day operations of the company. So our key statistic is paid shifts. So what a shift is an amount of time that a guard or an agent works at a specific job. So that could be a 6-hour shift, very unusual, but it happens if they want a half day or something and we agree to that. Uniformed accounts, uniformed armed are typically 8-hour shifts, and residential, corporate office, and executive protection shifts are 12-hour shifts. So we use various apps in order to keep track of all these things. One of our scheduling programs is called When to Work. So this is something that we build out the schedule and publish it, and through emails and what have you, the employees get what their schedule is. These schedules we want scheduled out 2 to 4 weeks ahead of time. Sometimes that's not possible because we don't have the shift that far out from the client, but we train them into getting us that because we want to have everything covered. We want to have enough time to cover everything. And then just have to solve problems if someone has to call off for some reason, which is unusual, but it does happen. Good, so this is our program here. It's When to Work. Each box is a paid shift. So the ones in black are scheduled. The ones in yellow are not yet scheduled. These specifically are there as placeholders on this schedule because we don't need somebody in that slot right here, but that's unusual that we'll have that. The yellow is your indicator that you need to fill that. So here in the notes, it says principal out of town, so we know that we don't have to fill that. This schedule goes down probably twice as long. Every executive protection account, residential security account, and corporate office is on this schedule. Employees can see where they work and not where other guys work. If it pertains to their detail, they'll have that information. If not, you can make the settings so they don't necessarily see what's happening somewhere else so they don't get confused. But this is our bread and butter. The bigger we can make this, the better off we're doing. In that, there's a balance of growth and quality control. So we've done very well with that. We don't want any breaks on growth at all. If we can blow this up 10 times tomorrow, that would be ideal. We just build the structure quickly. So what we're doing now is putting the systems in place and becoming more efficient at them, so that's not hard. So if you build it, they will come. It's kind of how we've built the whole company. So this schedule started with 1 or 2 boxes. So from here up is probably how it started. And now it's twice as long as what's on the screen now, if not a little bit more. So we're doing pretty well. And the growth rate is good. Double a year, roughly. If we can do that again this year, that'll be a good run. Typically, each detail has a detail leader. If it's more than just one guy at a time, it has a detail leader. So he's got to run the team, make sure it's scheduled, make sure the right guys are in the right positions, and then solve problems if a guy had to call off for some reason. So for example, guy was scheduled 2 weeks out and he has a doctor's appointment. So we ask for minimum 24 hours notice. That's even rough for us. We want more notice than that if a guy can't work a shift. But that's why we publish the shifts 2 to 4 weeks out. So if I get a shift in 3 weeks and I know I can't work it, now we have plenty of time to solve that problem. We hate last minute call-offs. It happens on occasion, but we've actually calmed that way down. So part of that is, do you have the right personnel? Do they have the right mindset? Do they want to work? are they who you want on that job? If a guy's calling off right before his shift, he's obviously undependable. So they get one or two of those and that's a wrap. And they understand that. So we make that clear. On any issues like that, we have disciplinary action forms that we put in place. Guy was late to work, he gets a disciplinary action form. So these are things that go in their personnel file. So if we need to look back at what's going on with somebody, then we have a track record. It also protects us as a company legally, right? If you do have to terminate somebody for some reason, first question the lawyers ask is, good, let me see his personnel file. And if there's nothing in there, I get berated for that. Our lawyers are good. And if I have a good built out personnel file, they go, good, yeah, we can work with this. Here's the parameters you need to do the termination.
Just out of curiosity, if you send in a disciplinary action form on somebody, do they have to sign that they received it and aren't disagreeing with it?
So how we handle that is we want them all to sign it. On occasion, we've had a guy not want to sign it. So we'll say, good, just sign it. There's your comments right there. You can say you disagree with it or whatever your concern is. If they refuse to sign it, period, it still goes in the file. Ideally, we want them to sign it. A guy who wants to work with you and wants to be there and understands that he did something wrong and can correct will sign it and say, okay, good, won't do that again.
So that would prevent framing of the guy, where if you're like, oh, I want to terminate this guy, just fill it up with some fake DAFs and then...
Yeah, no, we'll never do that. My direction to managers, we don't make things up. It's either a violation or it's not.
Which is why the signature makes it valid.
Yeah, exactly. So ideally, we want the signature. But we have had guys not want to sign it for whatever reason. But usually that's more of a combative employee that probably shouldn't have been there in the first place.
If you don't mind, give us an example of how you've dealt with someone calling the night before and trying to quit off the shift that's due at 6 a.m. and how you've dealt with that.
Yeah, so for last minute call-offs, there's various reasons. I couldn't get childcare for my kid. I ran out of gas. I mean, it's random things that there's not really an excuse. If you agreed to work on a certain shift, you're expected to be there. So that's what we relay to these guys is, listen, do not take a shift unless you're going to work the shift. So rain or shine, hailstorm, your car explodes and you have to run to work. We expect you to be there at a certain time. If something comes up that you can't avoid or you really need some help, we'll always try to fill the shift for you. But calling the night before within 24 hours or right before your shift, that makes it difficult for us to employ you because we're only as valuable as we're dependable to the client, which means you're valuable in your dependability. So we need you to follow through on your word once given. So it's just etiquette really in any job, but it's key here because we're protecting people and there's a reason for that. So we can't leave things uncovered.
Now, obviously, if someone's family member died, if they got sick, and they're literally like they have COVID and the client doesn't want them around.
Good question.
Last minute.
Good. So yes, recently COVID's been an issue. We've had that last minute. We scramble and get it covered. We have enough personnel and resources on the roster that we can do that. It's just challenging because oftentimes guys will live counties away. So guys coming from Orange County to work a detail in LA. During traffic, that can take them 2 hours. So if a guy just calls off 30 minutes before his shift, then we got an hour and a half gap. So we'll hold somebody over and just pay him the double time, not bill the client to keep things covered. So those are various things. If someone has a family member die or something like that, obviously we're sympathetic to that. If that happens last minute and the guy's got to step out, then obviously do whatever you have to do to take care of your family. We'll get the shift covered. The frivolous reasons we don't treat as such. So there are certain expectations. The standards for us as a company are very high. Meaning by the clients. Their standard is we want outstanding service at a certain level. We have to match that or we don't stay there. So we need our guys to match that standard as well. So how we handle complaints from any point of contact or a client is immediate attention. So for example, the guard didn't lock the door last night, what have you. Good, I understand. Do you know what door it was and who the guard was? I want specifics, right? I don't want a general thing. Who did it when? Oftentimes they won't know, right? But I know it was the back door because somebody came in this morning and it was unlocked. Okay, I understand. I'll check the schedule and I'll solve that right away. I'll go find out what happened first. Key point is find out what happened because you got to make sure the data is accurate, right? Before you start cutting people's heads off. Good, so find out that the data is accurate and then write a disciplinary action form as needed if somebody failed to do something that they were supposed to do or was in their standard operating procedures. If it wasn't in there, correct that and make sure the policy is there. either or of those two things, and then write a report via email back to the point of contact or whoever complained. Hey, we investigated this thing. This is exactly what happened. This is what we're doing to fix it. There could be a million examples of that, but that is key. A lot of times we'll get a complaint about a certain agent. Now, in this business, sometimes it's very intimate, especially on an executive protection team. So you're working so closely with this principal, you're with them every day, they see you all the time. That means when they're having a good day, you're there. When they're having a bad day, you're there. It's a very intimate thing, and sometimes if guys can't negotiate that and the social dynamics of that, we'll call it, they'll want somebody else. Or they'll just decide, I've had too much of this guy. Then we have to replace that. So completely understood, we'll sort it out. Sometimes the guy did something wrong. He stepped on himself, and we have to correct that with him and then make the change. Sometimes they didn't do anything wrong. I've worked with great guys. I worked with a Navy SEAL one time, way overqualified, had contracted for years, and the client said, I don't like him. And I was a newer guy, and I was like, I don't get it. Why don't you like him? Couldn't tell me why. And repeated questions, because I want to get them what they want. I said that. I want to get you what you want. I just need to know what the issue is. Couldn't tell us. The energy's wrong, or whatever the comment was. Understood. We'll trade him out. And we put him somewhere else. The guy was phenomenal. Just didn't work with that client for some reason. So sometimes we have to mitigate those types of things. We know our clients well enough. We know pretty much who's going to work beforehand. But again, until you're with that guy every day, sometimes the client doesn't even know. They'll sign off on the guy's profile sheet and the meeting with him. And then they'll work with him for 2 weeks and be like, I don't think he's going to work. And you got to deal with that. So it varies wildly. We're pretty good at placing people, but it is what it is.
Great.
Yeah.
So what happens if the client says, my guests waited for 10 minutes before you let them in, and they call you and tell you that? Why is this guard making my guest wait 10 minutes before letting him in? How would you expect the detail leader, the chief operations officer, and the CEO to deal with that?
Everything pretty much the same immediately. If you're the one receiving that, I completely understand. Let me find out what happened and I'll let you know. Or let me find out exactly what happened, right? Because you want to find out. We've had incidents like that where the guy didn't wait at all. Didn't wait. The guy just wanted to come in and complain. Other times where, no, they waited 20 minutes. It wasn't just 10 minutes. So that's why the key point of finding out exactly what happened has to happen. I've acted before without having that information and been wrong, and we don't want that. So you find out what it is. Say they did wait for 10 minutes. Hey, what happened? I don't know what an example would be. That usually doesn't happen, but we'll correct with the guy what happened, and then we'll write a report back to the point of contact via email and a phone call. This is exactly what happened. This is what we did to correct it. We've had those turn out good, no problem. Thanks for taking care of it. We've also had it come back good. He's out of here. It is what it is, and clients get what they want. So we've had that happen, and I err on the side of trying to protect a guy if he's worth saving, which everybody on our roster is. I don't always win. So sometimes we'll find him another account to work on type thing. So
should they justify and explain away that what the client's complaint is?
No, good question. Good question. So on this one, when you receive a complaint, every complaint's valid. Every single one is valid. You have to treat it as valid. So I have made the mistake myself of not treating it as valid, and I've burned every single time. So you have to handle that person's origination. This is what I think is that guy's eyebrows are too bushy. It can be ridiculous, right? And you have to say, I completely understand how you could see that guy's eyebrows are too bushy. What kind of eyebrows do you want on the detail? I'm being absolutely ridiculous right now, but that's you can't say they're not too bushy. I need this guy here. You can't do that. You lose every time. So you have to handle any origination you get as if it's valid. Does that make sense?
It's such a great.
All right, ridiculous story, but yeah. Okay, good. So more on the day-to-day operations. So we've gone over our scheduling, how we dealt with complaints. Management needs to be in close contact with the team all the time. So depending on the size of the detail, typically first you'll have a detail leader that runs the detail. He needs to know his guys, be talking to his guys. Do they like their schedule? Do they hate their schedule? Are they married? Do they have kids to deal with? Do they go to church on Sundays? Like, they need to intimately know these guys. It's gonna, one, help them schedule, and two, understand what our guys' needs are, right? So key mindset as far as management and up is we are there to service our employees. They are not there to service us. They're not there to do work for us. We are there to augment their life and experience by working for this company. I can't stress that enough. Whenever I've dealt with somebody as a peer and I'm trying to help them out, they want to go to work and they do great work, right? I try to treat others as I've been treated well, because I've been treated well and I've been treated not well. And not well sucks, and I didn't want to work there, right? So how many people can we help in the process? Our employees are key on that. So through management, they have to be in touch with the team. I'll call guys randomly every so often. If a family member dies from somebody, they get a call from me. They said the whole management should call the guy, give him condolences. Hey, do you need anything? That type of thing. You need some time off. When do you want to come back to work? You can do whatever you want. We're here to make sure you're okay, right? That type of thing. The car breaks down, I'll give them a call. Any negative experience in their life, it's not just because it affects work, it's because we need to care about our people, so they're going to care about us and our clients, right? Nobody gets paid enough to get in a fight for somebody else. And we're actually signing that check to get in a fight for somebody else, right? We're signing that contract. If somebody offers you harm, we're going to step in the way of that, right? That we minimally should be treating our guys with that type of respect, that they've made that agreement. Does that make sense?
That's great. And do they make good money compared to other?
Good question.
Yeah, what do they get paid?
So we've gone through a huge evolution in the industry on rates paid to guards and agents and bill rates to clients. We've had to go through some tough conversations with existing clients, and we've had tough conversations with employees. In order to stay competitive, we've had to up what we pay our guys quite a bit. We are very competitive, if not, and we're at the high end of the window for what guys get paid in the areas that they work for us.
Are you going to say the dollar amount that they get paid?
No, because it's going to vary wildly, and it also depends on background, training, and experience. So we have a printout of all the qualifications, and depending on what qualifications the guy brings to the table, will determine his rate. Also, tenure with the company is another one. So 1 to 5 years will raise your rate each year, and then depending on the qualifications and experience that you bring, that'll bump you up.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
And also, but what about like risk factors for that specific detail? Does that have any sort of play in it?
Not immediately until you start traveling outside of the country to a riskier area.
Okay.
And then that'll change it. So it'll vary wildly. If you're a medic or something like that, sometimes you'll get paid some more money. So what it does is it incentivizes tenure with the company, and also guys investing in themselves. Oftentimes guys will want to just work on a detail and not invest in themselves. They won't train with their weapon, they won't do anything. And anybody who understands security or firearms, if you don't train, you're going to be horrible. It is a perishable skill set. You have to train it. It has to happen. So we want guys to do that, and we want to incentivize that. So the different types of training courses, and we'll give them the courses and schools to go to that they can complete, will bump their rate up. Yeah.
That's awesome. And they know that, like you tell them that when you hire them.
On the onboard process, yeah, we brief them on all these
Cool.
things. Yeah. Another item in the day-to-day operations is we do shift confirmations every day. What this did initially is upset the guys who were dependable. Because they're, why are you calling me every day? But we had a phase there where we often had guys not show up to work, or show up late, or say they didn't know, or something like that. While they should know, because this program works great, it's just a secondary check. Every night, the night before, or at least 12 to 24 hours before the guy's shift, he gets a phone call from a manager. Hey, your shift is tomorrow, this time to this time, at this location. Are you set for that? The whole roster gets it. Everybody's used to it now, and if a guy pushes back on it, we just say, listen, this is our successful action to make sure every shift is covered, because we can't have things go uncovered. So just text me back, call me back, whatever you want to do. Just let me know you're good to go for your shift. So that happens every single day. Since we did that, we have 0 no-shows, and very rarely is someone late. If we do this, it eliminates all that. If we don't do it, it gets loose. So it's something, once we put in, it was good, we just keep it in now. So that's a key thing, because last minute scheduling things is difficult. So now I'm going to tell you what we do if we have open shifts or empty boxes on the schedule. So here we have a lot of empty boxes. These I explained are supposed to be empty. I believe this one is as well. But for example, say I have a few that are open on this schedule. I will randomly, personally check the schedule so I know who's working when. If I see something that's not there, I'll go straight to the chief operations officer and say, hey, you got open shifts, I need it handled. It's supposed to be 2 to 4 weeks out. They'll typically jump on it and either have a manager below them or go down to the detail leader if that account requires a detail leader to do scheduling and have them handle it. Once it's all done, it'll report back to me, good, the shifts are covered, and who it's covered with. So I like information, right? Shift's not covered, I need it handled. Good, I need to hear back at some point. It got handled and this is what I did to fix it and who I put there. I've had the company for 12 years. I know everything intimately. So I have to know who's on. There are accounts that certain guys cannot work. So if the wrong guy is in that slot, I'll push it right back down the org board and say, no, you gotta solve that. It's gotta be somebody else. And the reason why. And make a note so you don't bring me that back. Anyway, so that's typically how we'll handle open shifts. Again, this line is smoothing out incredibly in the last few weeks. So it's not as much of an issue, but definitely something to note. This is the lifeblood of the company, right? Shifts, having shifts, 1, and 2, having them filled with the right people. That's part of how we'll handle open shifts as they come up. Another point in the day-to-day operations, and it kind of also goes in with once a new guy is onboarded and we've placed him on an account. All of our accounts have standard operating procedures binders. So they'll have a full standard operating procedure. Most, if not all, have like an instant hat. Like, what are your most important policies that you need to operate on? How do you let people on and off the property? How do you operate the gate? How do you announce people when they come on and off the property? If we have an incident and you have to, for example, put a client in a safe room or shelter in place, what are your emergency procedures for that? Fire, earthquake, those types of things. That'll be your instant, what you have to know right now. So a guy will come on shift, we'll have him read through that and then ask him questions and make sure he retained it. Then we'll have him read the entire standard operating procedures, which might take more than a shift when he has stuff to do because it's actually kind of beefy on certain accounts. Anyway, that is our policy for how we run that account. And as long as they do everything within there and nothing outside of it, they're good. Also, if they make a mistake, there's something in there where we correct them. So we need to direct them back to that policy.
Who writes or who puts together the binders for the account?
I write them, and then we'll have a detail leader or something get the binder and actually put it in the binder type thing. Yeah. Or I'll put it together and send it out there. Okay,
because I was thinking you'd have to have the know-how from doing the site assessments. Like someone would have to know what they're writing.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're all customized to each client. Right. That said, there is a template, right? Or which is kind of and a checklist. Like, what are all the boxes I need to check to make sure this is a complete standard operating procedure? So for one site and another site, they're going to be different because the gate's in a different place. So that'll just be adjusted and customized to each account.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Good.
So how guys submit their time and get paid for work is through another one of our apps called T-Sheets, or for timesheets, right? So it's an app the guy can plug in when he starts work and when he ends work. When he takes breaks, he can also plug in there. That automatically populates our payroll software so we know what to pay guys. So we bill weekly and we pay weekly. There are a number of companies that pay every 2 weeks. So most of our guys like that they get a check every week. So they can either do direct deposit and it'll go right into their account. That usually takes a week or 2 to set up once they turn in the form, or they'll get a paper check if they want it to whatever address that they want. On onboarding, it's a key point to make sure that they have access and can get into T-Sheets. We've had a few guys recently that have had trouble logging in, which is always 10 times more work than if you had set it up right in the first place. So that's another line that's getting smoothed out right now, but that's how guys will get paid. So how guys get their uniforms is we spend too much money on our uniforms. I'll just start with that point. We buy quality stuff because we want to look the part. It's too much money, but we pay it anyway. So it's either a polo shirt if they're wearing a uniform, or a button-up short sleeve shirt and a jacket. Legally, you have to have a patch on each shoulder and a badge sewed into your shirt in order to work uniformed, especially if you're carrying exposed. So we'll get those made up, we'll get the patches put on. We have a stockpile of these things at the moment, and it's easy to get more. I'll typically give it to the detail lead of any account and have him keep it in whatever our office is. So there's a box of these shirts. If a new guy comes on, you can issue him a shirt there.
Cool.
Or a jacket, whatever he needs.
How many do they get?
They get a couple, like 2, and then sometimes guys are habitual losers of their shirts, and then we say, good, we're gonna start billing you if you lose another shirt. Yeah. Yeah. The day in the life of an agent, of an LSI employee, right? Good. I'll just pick a few guys off here. We have a guy, John, who is a detail lead. He has one of the most busiest jobs on the schedule. He runs a very large detail with multiple sites. He interfaces with the point of contact, who's the estate manager, quite a bit. And he even interfaces with clients directly on occasion. This guy's pretty 24/7. He gets calls all hours of the day, schedule questions. Guys needs to call off or was upset about his schedule or something like that. John takes care of all that. Physically, he works a site or sites 5 days a week. I'm trying to keep him Monday through Friday. It's consistency for the client, also consistency for him. And then he has enough face time with the team to be effective. That's an example of a guy. Another guy, Danny, he works a day shift if we're strapped to 6 days a week, but typically he'll have 4 days a week, 12-hour shifts, so 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every time at the same location for this guy. He's very good. Everybody loves him over there, and I get 0 calls. We call it fire and forget, right? If I can get an employee that's a fire and forget, I don't have to check up on him. I just know the job's gonna get done. I'm never gonna get in a complaint. Danny's that. So there's an example. In a guy's day at work, an agent's day, he'll show up. Etiquette is 30 minutes before your shift starts, latest. I've worked on details where you would be berated if you dared to come in 25 minutes before your shift started. Yeah. Now, as a company, we can't dictate that, because if we're not paying him for that, we can't tell him to do that. So we have to say, be on time to your shift. All your equipment on, ready to work. No going to the bathroom, no putting your stuff down. Like at your start time, you're there. Guys know, and I'll use members of the team to push this within the team, it's 30 minutes ahead of time. It's courtesy because you have to do a shift change. So Danny will come in and he will relieve Andy. And Andy will go down basically a checklist of what happened on the shift prior, right? These are the doors that are open and closed. These are alarms that are on or off. These are the principals on site. These are the guests on site. These are the staff on site. So, and here's the schedule for the day, the client schedule. So the guy coming on to relieve Danny has the full rundown of exactly what's supposed to happen that day, what happened before. He has complete command of his environment. So that takes time. At some of our sites, we have boards that show in and out, so it tells you who's there and who's not there. We also have information boards, which will have our BOLOs, which is our be on the lookout, right? So-and-so tried to attempt access to the day. We did a background on him, no criminal background on this guy, for example, and but keep an eye out for him if he comes back. It's this car, year, make, model, color, and a full description of who the subject is and name if we have it. So there will be a multiple of those if we had contacts like that we're concerned about. That means I can just walk into the office or the command post and have all the information I need to be successful for that shift. So that's typically a shift change. Then Danny will work through his day. He'll have a day shift checklist. So at certain times, lights need to be on and off, or gates need to be open or closed, or doors locked or unlocked, what have you. He'll know what he needs to do when. On that detail, he has a team, so there's 2 guys on at least at a time, and the secondary guy will do rounds or check certain things, check other structures, what have you.
Do you have that scanning app thing too?
Yeah, so on certain accounts, we'll use an app called TrackForce. So basically that means the guy can take his phone and walk around the property, and we have little, I forgot the term for them, but they're little basically dots that you put around the property, and the guy can scan his phone. What that does is it tells you that he's not sleeping, and he's actually going around and checking what he's supposed to check when he's supposed to check it. It also gives us printouts that we can issue to the points of contact or the client. Hey, this is what you're paying for. We checked 100 locations this week or whatever through the property, and these are the timelines So there's no question on is the guy doing what he's supposed to do when he's supposed to do it. So what guys wear for the detail varies depending on the detail. For example, if it's a uniformed, that's self-explanatory. If it's a plain clothes detail, we don't have a uniform, but we have a uniform. It has to be a collared shirt, polo or button down. Nice jeans, no holes in them, that kind of thing, or Dockers. And then no tennis shoes and no baseball caps. So one of these locations is a large ranch type estate. So the guy will wear some hiking shoes or something like that, but he'll still look presentable. Always have a sport coat in your car. If you get called out last minute to go to dinner with a client or something like that, we want guys to be ready to do that and look the part. So have whatever equipment you need. There are others where you're working a red carpet event, for example, and you're going to wear a suit and tie to that. So depending on what you're doing will dictate what you're going to wear. But no t-shirts, no hats, no tennis shoes type thing. We've had guys try to stretch the envelope, and that's not going to fly, right? We have to have standards in grooming as well. You can't have a wild beard as long as it's a well-kept beard and you look presentable and professional. We across the board on our accounts, regardless of what they are, we want guys to look corporate professional. So as far as equipment, we'll start with uniform guards. So a uniform guard will wear a Sam Browne or a duty belt, same thing. So if you look at a police officer and he has the large belt on with magazines and his gun and cuffs, pepper spray, a baton, and probably a taser, if he's in law enforcement, that is his duty belt. So our uniform guys wear a duty belt. Their gun is their responsibility, but we always want to know what it is and what holster they're using. There are certain holsters that are dangerous, and we don't want them using those. Typically, we'll use a holster like Safariland, which is a triple retention. So that means the pressure on the weapon system in the holster is a level 1. 2 is a hood, which you have to defeat this hood and then pull. And 3 is the pressure on the weapon system, the hood that you have to defeat, and then a button. We like our uniform guards in those because if an altercation occurs, it most likely will be a hand-to-hand thing very closely, right? So if I'm wrestling with somebody, I don't want them to be able to get my gun. If for some reason we were wrestling over it and I wasn't winning, right? Because once that comes out, it's bad. But we want them proficient with it so they can get to it if they needed to, okay? So that's that. We want at least a couple spare magazines, handcuffs. There are certain permits for pepper spray and a baton. If they have those permits, we'll let them carry those things. If they don't have them, they cannot carry. So that's typically the uniformed setup. He'll be wearing his polo shirt or button down, a jacket. Our uniform is black boots with OD green pants or Ranger green, we call them BDUs, battle dress uniform pants, and then the LSI tops. Go ahead.
Any sort of earpiece, radio type thing, or do you just use phones now?
Depending on the detail. So some will have a radio, some they don't want to hear it open, or you don't want it open, so they'll have an earpiece as well. So our uniform accounts will use that. Now, if I'm working an event or something like that and I have a 5-man team, I'll probably wear that, right? Because I want to be able to talk to him when he's way down there, or he's with another client on the other end of the block or something like that. Yeah. Or if I need to talk to my driver, he might even have it open in the vehicle, but I can call him, hey, pull around to the designated location at this time, whatever. More on equipment is guys need to provide for their own weapon system, ammunition, flashlight. These guys at this level that are in plain clothes need to bring their own equipment. As far as radios, we'll provide the radios. Some accounts have them, or other ones will rent them for if it's a short duration detail. We've never quite had to buy them yet, but obviously we would do that if we needed. As far as our plain clothes, like residential security teams and corporate offices, it's plain clothes. So corporate office would usually be something like this, suit, no tie. At the one we are, the culture of the company at one of them is that's too stuffy, right? People come to work in flip-flops sometimes. So we don't do that, but it's nice jeans, polo shirt, button up. They have to look professional. They should have a sport coat, but they don't necessarily have to wear it. We started with that and they said, you guys got to tone it down. But I'd rather have to tone it down than tone it up, right? So there's that. On the ranch type estate, we went through that. As far as these guys' equipment, they're carrying concealed. There's different ways to do that, but a lot of times it's an inside the waistband holster which means the gun is inside your waistband. It is what it says. Spare magazine in a pocket or mag carrier on your belt, but you're wearing a sport coat or a shirt that will cover that. You shouldn't, it's called printing. If I'm standing here and I have a huge gun sticking out like that, you know what it is. I'm not doing my job as far as concealment. So you want to have no clue. I worked for a client for 2 years at one point, and one of the managers came to me and said, "Hey, are you armed?" And I usually never answer that question. And I say, "I am when I need to be. Why do you ask?" Because they were paying for armed guards. And he said, "Because I never see it." He said, "This other guy, I always see it." I said, "Well, you're not supposed to see it. Because one, I don't want to freak anybody out. And two, I need that time if I get into something. I'd rather have somebody guessing about me. Maybe I'm the manager and I'm not a threat, right?" So you don't want to print. Anyway, there's those things. Guys will carry cuffs if they're working a res or they're having to deal with people that they might have to do an arrest or something like that or detain somebody. So they'll carry that and always a flashlight. Always. And on some of the estates that are big, it's got to be a flashlight that reaches out. So they have very small versions that'll fit in your pocket that'll reach out plenty far. Key point, all of these guys have to have all of their permits on their person, not in a drawer, not in their backpack, not back at home. They have to have their guard card in a wallet or something in their pocket. They have to have the exposed permit in there, and they have to have the concealed carry license in there as well. If they're carrying pepper spray or a baton, they have to have those permits on them as well. You have to be able to present that if you get into something to law enforcement when they're doing the after action. One more thing on permits, there's one exception to the exposed firearm permit. This is a key exception and almost no one knows it, right? The exception is if you're active law enforcement with a letter from your department that you can work off duty, you don't need the exposed permit. That is the only way you don't need it. So we've had guys that worked with us for some time and they didn't have certain permits. We won't let them operate armed without the permits that they need or carry anything that requires a permit. So that's what the day-to-day operations of the company are like. Let me tell you how agents and guards have dealt with incidents. For example, a uniformed guard at a school may have to deal with a parent who's upset. They weren't let in right away. They're in a rush. They got to get to work, that kind of thing. But our protocol is they don't come in until they're cleared. And or they have a sticker on their windshield, and this parent used a different car and doesn't have a sticker on the windshield. The guard didn't recognize them, so they held them up to make the call. So that's a very minor incident, and if the guy can communicate with people effectively, it's a non-issue. Just, "Sorry, sir, this is our protocol, and I have to make sure you're cleared before I let you in without the sticker." Something simple like that. Other than that, we've had people show up to residences and say that they had an appointment with a principal. So our guys go through their checklist. Good, is it on the schedule? Check with the POC. Nobody knows this guy. Then they have to turn him away. There is a skill set in that because you do not want to confirm or deny who lives there, even if it's open source information, which some of these places are. So I came here to see Joe Blow, right? Great, can you show me your ID or hold your ID up to the camera? Yeah, what's your name? Good, they check it against the list, that kind of thing. So it'll go through a progression of verifying this guy without confirming anything. They determine that he's not supposed to be there. So there's nobody here by that name, sure. But by then he showed you his ID up to the camera, which can read everything. And we've got the information we need. The car's on camera. We got the year, make, model, license plate. We've got this guy's ID if he decided to show it. We have ways to identify him in a background investigation if we need to do that. So with something like that, he'll get turned away. If it's a non-incident, we'll probably do a background on that guy. Criminal civil, find out who he is, who does he work for, what's the issue, just to deem it as not a threat. Sometimes it's a fan. Sometimes somebody had the wrong address. Like we want to determine what exactly it was. Sometimes it is a stalker, or he'll be on the lookout list already. So we'll match it against that. Good, this is this guy. He made another contact, and we'll go further as needed. So if we need to, if it's a stalker who's repeated incidents and it has committed a crime, then we'll liaise with local law enforcement on that. We've had a number of incidents where we've dealt with local law enforcement, and we have points of contact in various departments that we'll talk to for that kind of thing in the detective bureau or what have you. Our liaison is is usually if somebody trespasses, right? That's something that we'll immediately call law enforcement on. If somebody breaches a property, law enforcement's on the way. That's our first thing, is to make that call. When they come, we want to give them description of subjects and vehicles and direction of travel. There's also a checklist on what you need to hand off, but those are some basics. Whenever an incident occurs, no matter how big or small it is, guys need to write an incident report. So they'll write an incident report and send it up through their chain of command. It'll go to the detail leader, to the manager, and then get all the way up to me. Detail leader, manager, exec, and then to me. Oftentimes I will have to relay that to the client, which does a few things. One, it validates why we're there. It validates that we did what we were supposed to do. And it validates that there is a reason for security to be there. So it checks a bunch of boxes. We have had guys not perform perfectly, like they didn't get the description, or they didn't ask for the ID, or they didn't take a picture of the license plate because it was out of camera view. So they didn't get us anything to go on, and it was a concern, the contact. That we remediate with that guy on his policy. Like, these are the things we need and that you have to do when there's an incident or suspicious contact. So these are all in the standard operating procedures on each account, but just a general idea for people to understand what different incidents could be and how we do that. If there's a use of force incident, what that means is somebody had to go hands-on. I had to, either the guy aggressed me and I had to fight him off, or I had to detain him for whatever reason. You got to write up an incident report on that. That's key. Those reports have to go to BSIS. They got to go up and down the chain to the client, to BSIS, to legal, so they can look at it for us. Like, we got to cover a lot of bases. That never happens really if we're doing our job effectively ahead of time. But those are just some examples.
And to what degree of force or physical contact classifies that? Anything? Someone pushes the guy slightly, or if it's like they threw a punch kind of thing?
Really anything we want the report on, and we'll make a determination based on the report and the interview after that.
Okay.
Right? If somebody just bumped into you, yeah, good. What happened? Was he using, aggressive language? What happened? Like, we want to know the totality of the circumstances, right? Obviously, if it was fisticuffs or a shooting, God forbid, right? Or a knife, whatever, that stuff everything has to be in the report, and we got to send it to all those people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Has there ever been an incident where a traveling executive protection agent has had to defend a principal?
There have been. If your advance work is sound, usually you don't have to worry about that, but it happens. For example, had a client on a set in China. Production had paid certain shopkeepers and not others. The guys that didn't get paid weren't happy about that. And the rules in China are different. It's a communist country. So whereas in the US, I can buy a sidewalk, right? I can pay the city for the sidewalk, it's mine, whoever can park there. You can tell people you can't walk down. We have a permit. China's different. Everyone owns everything and no one owns anything. It's actually like a principle. That's my sidewalk as much as it is yours. So I don't care how many permits you have, it's mine. I can walk wherever I want. So there's a little bit of that. Then you don't pay shopkeepers, it compounds the problem. So we had people walking through shots, grabbing props and chucking them. It was a whole issue. We had a principal go to get into, looked like he was about to go sideways with one of these people. So we had to grab him, get him out of there to a safe spot. A couple guys solved that problem. But so we've had that happen. It is another country like that. There was no use of force because we handled it before that happened.
So you had to physically grab your client, though, and remove him.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of doctrine and principles in how you do that and when and why and all that. But yeah, we had to do that. But better that than letting them get in a fight or us getting in a fight in a foreign country.
For sure.
My comment was, you're not allowed to do that because if you go to jail here, we're going to have trouble getting you out. Don't do that again. Yeah, it was one of those things. That's an example. Other than that, it's usually diverting things. Typically, you're moving from one place to another on an executive protection detail, from the vehicle to inside the venue, from the venue back to the vehicle, from one room to the stage, then back to that room. So typically, you want to move fast enough that nothing can hang you up. Routes of travel are cleared before that. and then anything introduces itself, it's a divert type thing and continue moving so you don't get hung up type thing. Anyway, ton of doctrine on this and ways to do it, but that's a very general answer to the question.
Are agents expected to deal with a medical situation?
Yeah, if required. So there's different requirements, right? If your principal has a medical situation, you want to handle that. We've had a guy on a residence where a worker had a heart attack on site. He was an EMT, and he gave him some chewable aspirin, and the doc said he saved his life, or the paramedic said that. But he knew what to do and had the stuff with him, the equipment with him. So yeah, he responded to that, correct. Handling your principal, correct. There's also disciplines in that if I'm working with a principal and something bad happens to someone else, that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is the principal. You get them to safety. So there are times where you may want to intercede in something and you can't because you have a responsibility to do that. So that's an example.
Great. Have you ever had a principal outrun or outdrive an agent and therefore the agent can't speed because it's against the law? And what do you do in that situation?
Good. So if someone is speeding, if you have a principal speeding and you have to chase them, for example, this has happened, we will have a conversation with the principal on what we can and can't do. We tell guys, do everything you can within the law. Sometimes guys will bend that and go a little faster than they should, what have you. But we don't want them driving unsafe. And we don't want them getting into wrecks or getting tickets or whatnot, right? So we tell them, follow the law of the land. I'll have a conversation with the decision makers saying, hey, this is what we can and can't do, and it would help us if we operate in this box, so to speak. Anyway, so we that is an incident that will go up the chain of command, and then we'll give them top cover and help them out with that.
Cool.
Yeah. Main issues we have to deal with are interfacing with points of contact. So when you're intimately connected on an account like this, people get flustered for whatever reason. Logistics didn't go right, the flight didn't get booked, whatever. So sometimes you'll have an estate manager, assistant manager, publicist lean on you. Hey, I need you to do this and that. You have to know what your job is and what you can and can't do within your job. So our guys do know that. But for example, I'm not going to go buy gum at the store when we're in the middle of a red carpet event or something like that, right? I have to do what my job is. So guys have to understand what their job is and have enough self-confidence and understanding of that they make the right decisions. We tell them to make the right decision at the right time for the right reasons. If you can answer all those questions, you're good. And some things are pressure, right? There's last minute. I tell guys, if you want to do this work, you have to work with pressure. It's what separates the good ones from the bad ones. So you have not enough time and you have to check 10 boxes. You have time for 2. Pick the best ones and try to get as many of the 10 as you can get in. For example, you have an advance you have to do, but you only have an hour before the principal gets there. That sucks. You want much more time than that. Good, well, you walk through the venue, talk to your points of contact, you'll move quickly and get that done and get all the key points done that you have to get done. And push it up your chain of command. Hey guys, I had 1 hour to do at least a 6-hour site assessment or whatever. Good, then we'll have conversations with the client. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but typically client education is a big factor. Like, hey, we can't do things in no time, and the more time you give us, the better. And the more we have those conversations, the more it starts to work.
Cool.
Yeah. There's a balance between doing security work and customer service. So a lot of what we do every day is customer service based. For example, carrying a client's bags. Here's some examples of that. If they come onto the secure property, you have a team of 2 other dudes working there, and they park in front of the door and they ask, hey, can you grab my bags? That's not a huge deal. You are not going to put them in danger or do anything illegal by carrying their bags in the house. And it makes you more valuable because they didn't have to do it. They go, that's great, the guy brought my bags in. Right? Good. Fair customer service ask. If they're asking the security team to go pick up the waste after the dog, right? While they should be doing something security related, they'll push it up the chain and we'll have a conversation and make sure we come to understanding on that. I don't like guys having to do stuff like that. There are other roles that can fulfill that need, right? I've been on the road with a principal and an assistant shopping in New York. What's the big street in New York? Broadway, whatever it is, whatever the big shopping district is. We're in there, they're in and out of the store, and the assistant comes to me with a handful of bags. Goes, here, can you put these in the car? And I said, nope. And they go, offended immediately. Why not? I said, because we're in a high traffic area with a very recognizable client, and I'm not gonna step away from the client. But the car's right there, and the driver will pop the back for you if you need that. This was even risky, because this is one that broke guys. This assistant would break guys. But I held my position, I had a good reason. The principal came up, stood there, I reiterated myself, and the principal just smiled and walked away, basically in agreement. So it was fine. Now, risky move, but here's my thing. Maybe I would have got fired for that, right? But what if I took the bags and went inside and then something happened to my principal while I stepped away? I'd rather get fired for not carrying bags than for some harm coming to my client because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, right? So these are the decisions guys have to make on the fly while they're working, right? You want to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. So there are customer service aspects, but if it is unsafe or risky or illegal, we won't do it. We've had clients in the music industry, they partake in various extracurricular activities. We need to know what we're carrying, where and when, right? I can't just let somebody hand me a bag. Hey, here's a bag, can you carry that to the car? I don't know what's in the bag. I'll find a way out of that, right? If I'm carrying a bag with something that shouldn't be in there and I have weapons on me, right, and permits that I live by and a career, I'm gonna lose all that if the wrong thing's in that bag. So you have to be responsible enough and able to articulate yourself out of those things. We don't typically work for clients like that, but something to be aware of as an agent so you don't get caught up in something that you shouldn't be involved in. So we've had a guy carry a bag before and it was questionable what was in there. Say, hey, don't ever do that again. It puts you at risk, it puts us at risk. It even puts the client at risk, right? Because then they lose their security if something goes sideways. Anyway, different aspects to that question.
These are great examples. Thank you.
Yeah. So those are some incidents my agents have had to deal with. So now we'll talk about law enforcement liaison and like in a relationship between agents and police or how that interface needs to happen. So there are a few different circumstances where that will need to take place. You have a trespasser, I think I mentioned earlier. You'll call law enforcement right away. You'll have to give them a description, direction of travel, that type of thing. Or if you had to detain the person, have them come effect the arrest. So there are ways to do that, but obviously you need to know how to articulate what happened, what you did, why you did it, and what you need from law enforcement. Now, the political climate, specifically in LA, has changed recently in the last few years. And as far as district attorneys, they do not like to prosecute on anything. So whereas I've had DAs in meetings tell me, I'm gonna throw the book at this guy, but I need you to give me what I need. It's completely reversed now. So there are even assaults on peace officers that they won't file on now. So that is unheard of. So for example, we had a stalker with 10 years of sex crimes, being in and out of jail, trespass on a client's property on Christmas Day of all days. I had to respond to that. We didn't get a hold of the guy. He was gone by the time we got there. But we had to interface with law enforcement and the detectives on the liaison because the guy made it into the house. Nobody was working it at that time because nobody was there. Got to give video footage, like there's a number of things. We got to do a full report internally and then hand that off so we can help law enforcement as much as possible with doing their investigation and pursuing this guy. He eventually got caught and extradited on an unrelated charge back to, I think it was Oklahoma or something like that. Anyway, but those are a few different examples. Now, if we get a new account in a new city, and we have armed guys working the property. Specifically, some properties, they'll have you sit in your car outside on the street. Not our ideal setup, but it is what it is sometimes. We will call the local watch commander, who's the guy that runs the shift in the department. Say, hey, this is who we are, this is our company. We can give you our licensing information, all that if you need, but we're operating in this area, our guys are armed. This is the vehicle, this is the guy's name if they want all that information. But just so you know, we'll be here. And they'll say, okay, good, we'll give you a couple drive-bys if we can. And it kind of builds that relationship. So when something goes wrong and you call them, it's not a brand new call. You're who doing what, where? Still might be that, depending on if they turn it over to each other on shift changes. But at least they have some familiarity with you and they can help you with whatever you need. Here's another example of how we'll involve ourselves with law enforcement called building a file. So a guy trespasses. You would like to get him charged with trespassing if you can. Depending on the circumstances, you may get helped with that. For example, trespasser came onto a property at night, ended up in the house, the whole thing, and they filed on it immediately because it was the middle of the night. They called the judge at 2 o'clock in the morning and got an emergency restraining order. We like that, right? Now there's a paper trail. We have a trespass charge and a police report on it, and we have an emergency restraining order. That goes into a file, right? Which builds a case against this individual. And depending on how much of a threat they are, that you need that. So for example, where we've had a guy with 10 years of sex crimes, very legitimate threat to this principal, nobody would file on him, or the DAs didn't want to prosecute. He got extradited on something else. We didn't catch him there, so we didn't have a trespass on the guy. We didn't have anything in a new unit at a time. So even though he has a bad background, like, you have to build a case from when things happen. So it's not just letting people go necessarily. You want to press charges as much as you can and as much as the client will let you, but you want to build that file. Your internal incident reports are all good, but any kind of legal document is what's going to matter as far as a trespass or what have you. So those are some general examples of our law enforcement liaison activities. All right, so here are the long-term goals of LSI. To systemize operations and eliminate COPE. To build responsible leaders that can apply extreme ownership to their areas of responsibility. To expand the number of clients, the production, and the revenue of LSI, facilitating more resources for clients, personnel, and executives. To double production by the end of 2022. To implement training facilities for our employees to be the best in the business. So with all that, welcome to LSI. We're happy to have you here. It takes every position in the organization in order to make these things a reality. So what I'm looking at for LSI over the next several years is continuing to nearly or doubling in expansion every year. Happy employees, clients, vendors, whoever we can make happy, we want to make happy. We want people excited about LSI and wanting to work with LSI. So if we deliver a high standard of product and we're consistent with it every time, that's going to happen. Appreciate you being here and being a part of that. So more on the long-term goals of LSI, specifically systemizing operations for efficiency and eliminating COPE. We're implementing an organization chart into the company. These are each different divisions of the company. They're different colors because they're different areas of responsibility that the one above it can take ownership of. So if you go from the top, is me. My responsibility is the entire org. Then we have a few executives here in charge of different sections or different, they handle multiple divisions. I'll just read off the divisions really quick. So executive division, that's for the executives of the company, legal, the office of the CEO, those types of things. Establishment division is human resources, communications, and then there's inspections and reports in there. Registration division, promotion, publications, and Department of Sales. That's where we're going to go get work. The accounting division speaks for itself. Operations division, this is where the majority of the activity happens. All of our agents and guards are in this area, and this is what makes the org go. This is where our product flows from for the organization. Quality control division, and then public activity division. Quality control just makes sure operations is happening as it should and correcting things as needed. Public activities division is reaching out and making our services well known so we can get new clients and expand. If you're with LSI, you fall somewhere on this org chart. Whether you're in the operations division or you're doing sales, what have you, you're gonna fall on here somewhere. Everything in the org chart lends to the valuable final product, which we call the VFP, which is safe clients and their interests through high quality security solutions. Everyone in the organization lends to that, and you have the support of the entire org chart in making that happen. Implementing this is what's going to create expansion. So our biggest challenge to expansion has been, we've been in COPE for a long time, meaning too much work, not enough guys, and we're scrambling on schedules and that kind of thing. We've pretty much settled that out, and things are running pretty efficiently. In our logo, it says effectiveness through efficiency. So we need to be efficient to be effective. And the more that we can do that and put these systems in place, the more we're going to grow. So that is the intent as far as that goes. More on responsibility. So I'm going to steal this from a manager that we had for quite a while that did a great job. There are owners, renters, and squatters in any organization. Your squatter is the guy that shows up late, leaves early, does the bare minimum amount of work, and it's not quite an exchangeable product, right? It's just enough barely to get by. You have renters who do show up on time. They complete the job until it's done, and they do satisfactory work. Whatever the standard is, they'll hit that. Then you have owners. These guys take complete ownership of their area of responsibility, whether it be a shift or a department or a division or the whole organization, and they overproduce. They give a higher than expected product. It's theirs, they own it, they take pride in what comes out of there. So we are looking for owners at every position of the company. So as far as responsibility, if someone's in charge of some position or even within a division, some area of the organization, we want them to own it like it's their own, not just show up and kick their feet up on the desk and drink coffee. We want them to overdo the job, find gaps and shortfalls and fill those things. Always looking for work and solving problems. That's how we mentor our team. That's how we attempt to build our team. And those are the people that we're looking for to be a part of the team. So as far as what's expected of you as working for LSI is the best job you can possibly do and continually creating on that to make it better. LSI standards for me are above and beyond, right? What is the expected level of service? We are going to do more than that. Whether it's, you're supposed to sit in a command post and watch cameras. Good, well, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna notice things that are wrong and write reports on that kind of thing. I'm gonna do rounds more often than I need to rather than just the bare minimum of every hour or 2 hours. As a manager, I'm gonna call my guys on the weekends and make sure they're doing okay and go out of my way to make sure everyone's happy, everyone's getting what they need, delivering what they need, and getting where they need to be and helping the company do the same. So moreover on employees' standards of service that they're providing. In maintaining a high level of service, it's from your demeanor, your speech, how you present yourself. It is a number of things. And that's expected to be at the top of the chart. Some accounts you can get away with things on. We don't want to get away with anything because we can. We want to maintain the highest standard of service. For example, corporate professional is a pretty high standard of service if you're working for a major corporation. We want to do that for all of our clients. If it's not required or appreciated, it's probably a client that we don't want. So I want to talk about a training facility we're beginning to put together. We're hoping to have it open and operational by the end of the year. I'm having continuous meetings lately about this, but what we want from this is to maintain and elevate the standard of training of our agents. So for people working for LSI, it's going to be very accessible. It will be a way for guys to keep up their permits and do continuing education and training for that so they can keep them active, but also to elevate their background and experience through training and keep them up to speed. All of these things, whether firearms or hand-to-hand or edged weapons or even just dealing with people, are perishable skill sets. If you don't exercise the muscle, it atrophies, right? So this is a way to make us the best standard of service that's out there. There will be ancillary services. We'll handle other public, such as civilians, military, and law enforcement with this setup. That's all I'm going to say about it for now, but it is a training facility that has already been very successful, and we're going to expand on that with a new location through some partnerships. But it is actually a great opportunity. The counterpart has used this to build his security company where he had clients go through and say, good, no one else can do my security. You have to do it based on seeing what they saw there. And his guys going through that type of training. So more on that later. It'll be a recruitment pool. It'll be a maintaining standards and elevating them with guys we already have. And we'll also be able to work with other companies and their teams can come through there. So it'll be a separate entity that is doing its own work, but it's going to be
literally like Div 1, Div 5, Div 6, Div 4.
Yeah.
And it'll probably be an additional source of income for you because you're going to also be training civilians. It basically will expand your whole org to do that.
Yeah. So that's the intention exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's good.
It's great.
So if you're on this org chart, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you here. I'm happy to have everyone. I feel very fortunate to have our executive strata and management strata in this company. Everybody is supremely capable of building what we want to build with LSI, and it's an honor to have you here. So welcome.